Yeah.
I know in your position covering the Pacers, you don't get to follow the Hoosiers quite as much now. Last night, Indiana back on the winning ways with a win over Nebraska. Nebraska coming off of a shocking win, one of the biggest upsets of the year, knocking off Creighton in Omaha, a place they haven't won it since '95. But man, they at no point did that I feel they stressed Indiana last night at all. And part of it was you give Indiana credit for, and the other part of it was Nebraska was a little bit better than Nebraska's been.
Yeah. No, I mean, I feel like every year right around now, usually when Indiana almost always gets Nebraska in its December games for whatever reason, whether it's home or on the road. It just tends to work out that way. Basically when they have those two in December that they end up playing. And I feel like at this point we're always like, well, maybe Nebraska, you never know, they might be all right. And then Indiana just trucks them by 20. Nebraska is always good for like one flash of just maybe, like in November and December. They're always sort of good for that. Well, they played somebody closer than they were supposed to. They beat somebody they weren't supposed to beat. Something like that. And Creighton's an extreme example, because that Creighton team's really good, and is going to be really good. I mean, like, because you definitely do overreact to like one result at this point in the year. I think it's easy to overreact to Indiana losing to Rutgers in the same way. I'm not surprised, especially playing them at home. Usually playing them on the road is a bit of a different issue. It's a weird place to play. And they draw pretty well, and it's a nice arena and whatnot out in Lincoln. But this one, I wasn't surprised to see them come off of the game they had against Rutgers. As bad as they got beat up, I figured they would be bothered and annoyed, and they would just put it to Nebraska. I didn't think they were going to have a tough time with this one, and man, they really did put it to them. But I mean, I think, obviously it stands out. The numbers that stood out to me, and I had it on, like I was watching Pacers on my TV and Indiana on my laptop, and trying to sort of look back and forth, and also like have conversations with my wife and stuff. So like I was sort of all over the place. That thing line that's on the bottom right now, Brittney Griner.
Talk about some breaking news. That's
about an hour ago. So it's been.
I did not see that. That shocks me because I don't know if it was yesterday or the day before, but I was just reading about her being shipped off to basically some gulag
penal colony. Penal colony.
And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, she can seriously be gone. Which that just sucks. It's not. I'm not a fan of her. But it doesn't
made her do the whole bit. Yeah. No. I mean, I would have been. We'll get back on this. I'll get back to Indiana basketball. I promise. But yeah. No. They ended up having to trade the arms dealer Victor Bout for her straight up 1-to-1. They were trying to get,
which is great now. Which is, I think there's going to be a lot of people that have problems with that.
There are.
And I'm not going to disagree that they shouldn't.
I mean, here's the issue. Like, she was doing a bit that was way more than people do for the same offense. I mean, drug offenses carry up to 10 years, but like, she was arrested and given the whole 9.5 years for the purpose of this. Like, this was a political job. Like, this was, a dictator in the middle of a deeply unpopular war, like at home, and a absolutely condemnable war abroad, basically one that everybody sees as very clearly aggressive and a straight up invasion, trying to get something out of the United States because they could. And it was, like there's cultural issues involved. He is obviously not a fan of the LGBTQ community, and Brittney Griner is a member of that. Like for all the reasons, this was political and symbolic, and they got her on basically nothing. I mean, like I just read this again, 0.7 of a gram. She was going to do 9.5 years for 0.7 of a gram, like residue in the hash pipe. I mean, like if you're I get it. I'm not a drug guy myself, but dear Lord, I mean, that's insane. And so like, it was obviously
we're basically talking about marijuana here though, right?
Yeah. Marijuana. This was always symbolic.
It's a joke.
Stuff. Yeah, this was always a symbolic political deal. Like if anyone's like, well, like anybody else would have got that and they would have got 10 years. No, they had her trapped because she was a basketball player, because she was prominent. And she checked some of these other boxes that Vladimir Putin individually, personally does not like. Yeah. So like, let's not act like, oh, like you guys made this deal and it's such a bad thing. Like you couldn't let her do 9.5 years. Like she was that because they could make her, into a totem. Like she didn't owe 9.5 years. So yeah, it's not, but like it was insane. And like none of it's cool. Don't get me wrong. Like, but it's international, like espionage, stuff like that. That's the kind of thing we're talking about here. Like they grabbed somebody symbolically because they wanted somebody that we had, and that the United States had, basically. And like it comes back to nobody ever better go play there ever again. I mean, there was a reason why women's basketball players were playing in Russia. They were paying much, much better than the United States was, and then any other foreign country was. For reasons dealing with like all those oligarchs made that like kind of their deal. That was kind of a prestige thing. It was sports washing. It was all that kind of stuff. So nobody better ever go there again. Even when this war is over, even if Vladimir Putin is ousted, nobody better ever go play basketball in that country ever again. Men, women, anybody, for this, flat out. Anyway, back to Indiana basketball. So no, I mean, I think what stands out, obviously Trace Jackson-Davis was phenomenal, posting a triple-double. I mean, 11 assists, like I think that's really, I think, the biggest area of growth for him as a player that you
and importance. I mean, the importance of that. I talked about the importance of, because that's another element of Indiana's offense. If they can consistently, and if it's not Trace Jackson-Davis, if he can pass out of the post to get scoring, that's what Indiana, and that's another element that Indiana needs to be an elite team. They're not an elite team yet, but they can be. I mean, they have the components to be that. They're not that yet. Of course, part of it has been injuries, and I think these injuries have actually been beneficial. You're forcing Tamar Bates and Trey Galloway to play some minutes that they normally wouldn't play, and they're responding very well. It's hurt Xavier right now. Hopefully he's able to use this as learning tools, but the last couple of games have really affected him. It's really affected his play.
Sure. Yeah. No, it puts some stress back on him, and he's going to be back to feeling like he's got to do everything. And, that's X. It's just you have to you ride those waves with him. Basically, that there's going to be some periods where he thinks he has to do it all. And when he does that, he tends to make some mistakes, play too fast, try too hard. When he's playing with Hood Schifino together, I mean, I think he found a rhythm for how does he do exactly what he's supposed to do. And both those guys sort of play off of each other. Like, I think that took him a while too, to get used to, how do I modulate myself, basically, that I'm not, because he felt like he had to do everything last year, and he was mostly right, because I mean, they had Rob Finney, and they could play together and stuff, but Finney's not as dynamic as Schifino is, and I think he also felt like he had to prove he belonged, and he had to prove that, like, the freshman cup wasn't going to come in and just take his job, and then they could play together, and he was still necessary.
A lot of talk about Trace Jackson-Davis before this season, with him developing a jump shot, the lack thereof, the yada yada yada. He continues to just do things though that are so good. I don't know. Is his game gotten to the point to where I still don't know that he's gotten to the point to where he can do without that shot for his future?
I mean, he's gonna, like, just after having spent a couple weeks in the NBA. Now I'm all like, educated, right? Sure, whatever. No, but I mean, there's definitely a place for him. I mean, the issue is he's not. I don't think he can start with what he has. I think that's sort of the issue. He's not a top 10 pick. He's not a top 15 pick. Or maybe if he can hit some shots, like he goes up. I mean, you just want proof that he can shoot the ball. He got to take sometime. I mean, he really does. There's got to be a point where he takes some jumpers. Now, I'm sure part of the issue was the thumb. I'm sure that didn't help. basically, because I'm sure he didn't feel confident pulling up and doing something he's never done before when he's not operating at 100%. You know, and I imagine that when that thing gets healthy, then he's going to try some. But I mean, he does have to. I mean, he really has to do it. Like he has to cross that Rubicon and say, I'm taking a couple of these. And I understand why he doesn't do it. Now, the one thing I'll say, especially having watched some of this, like the thing about the NBA is everybody thinks they can make them like that. Like, but it's not like the percentage is lights out in the NBA. I mean, there's a lot of guys taking a lot of bad shots. And there's a lot of guys missing. I mean, the thing about it is just anybody on the floor can hit it, and that spaces the floor. But it's not like, even like Curry is at like 41, 42, somewhere in that range. You know, like these guys aren't hitting 50. You know, it's not like they're walking in the door like everybody's truly a lights out 3-point shooter. It's everybody's capable. And so Trace just has to prove he's capable. You know, but it is important that he does. You know, I mean, like you've got to be able to space the floor. You've got to be able to pick and pop. You know, like if you're going to be a 5, you got to be able to pick and pop. And if you're going to be a 4, you better be able to sit in the corner and hit one. Just from time to time. Doesn't have to be all the time. You got to be able to do it sometimes. But you can, I mean, you can get on the floor. Like Isaiah Jackson doesn't shoot from outside. He plays 4 and the 5 as a rim runner with a whole ton of explosion. But he comes off the bench, and I don't think that's going to change. I think he's a very good bench player doing that. And obviously he's been in since he was a freshman. I think he might have more raw athleticism than Trace does, where Trace has a better all-around game. If you can't shoot, you're probably coming off the bench as a 4 and a 5.
Fred Hoiberg said that Trace plays better than his dad, Dale Davis.
I'm sure he does. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's a different world. It's just a different world. I mean, there are 5 big men that are playing college basketball right now that, had they come out in 2003, would have been top 15 picks. No doubt. 100%. You could say that with absolute certainty. Trace, Baycott, Timmy, who am I forgetting? Dickinson, definitely. And Shibwe, 100%. Absolutely are top 15 picks last year before, if this was 2003, but it's not.
The defense, Trace Jackson Davis, for me, has really picked up. I'm not that he wasn't playing last year, but sure. It's this year. It just seems to be just a step more. It's like, man, he is a little more conscious. Getting a shot up around him is difficult. And to the other side, though, every time you think Race Thompson is kind of slacked off, because he gets some nights he is.
He had a bad night against Rutgers. Just had a bad.
But then other nights where he's kind of quiet, but he had 9 points on 4 of 7 shooting last night, 6 rebounds in 25 minutes. Right. Not much to complain about.
No, Race is going to do fine. He's had a couple of bad games, and he's getting pushed. You can now put 2 other guys in his position. You can put, obviously Geronimo, you can play there. You can put Reno there. And I think the fan base is looking at that and saying oh, you got to play that guy. You got to play that guy. You got to play that guy. And they've sort of reached this point that I've seen enough of Race, and it's like, well, I want to see what these guys can do, because they've got higher ceilings and more potential, and they're more raw athletes, man. Race has had a extremely productive career. He is gritty as all get out. And, he does so many things right. And so you don't want to, run him off just because he had a bad game. He's not capable of the same kind of spectacular that Geronimo is, because he doesn't have that leaping ability. And Reno's going to be special. I know Reno didn't have a good game against Rutgers either, but you've seen enough to know Reno's going to be really, really good.
Oh, absolutely.
Reno's an all Big Ten player next year. Once he can, be their 5 guy, no doubt. If he's an all Big Ten player, if he's not an All-American. I think CJ Moore, who I respect an absolute ton at the Athletic, their Kansas guy, tweeted out, I think, at the beginning of the year, that he thinks that's possible, that Reno could be an All-American, and that's, really impressive. So the thing about it is, with those 2 guys nipping at his heels, everybody's, I think, picking on Race more. But yeah, Race has done a lot. Race can guard so many positions. He does so many smart things, and he's such a good, character guy. Don't forget about Race. Don't everybody, make this a deal I mean, you guys could do whatever you want. You're Indiana fans. I'm not. But, like, you'd be making a mistake if everybody, kind of creates this public pressure campaign to, get Race fewer minutes. That's
oh insane. Yeah, that absolutely. I agree with that absolutely, because if you watch Malik Renew right now, like you said, he's going to be great, but he's not yet. He's learning, and as the competition level has increased, we've seen him. Yeah, with the learning curve is picked up for him. The game is just faster, and that's why he's getting more fouls. And these guys are older, bigger, stronger than he is. Period.